A new era of college football is upon us. A new era of Ohio State football is upon us. Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. 10 TV's Dom Tiberi, joined by Adam King from The Fan, 97.1 The Fan, the one and only Timmy Hall, and the great Buckeye receiver, 97.1 The Fan, Dane Sanzenbacher. Real quick, Timmy, we appreciate everyone tuning in, and we especially appreciate our sponsors, right?
Yes, we do. We do. That's right, Dom. Chasing the Championship is sponsored by Logan Services. Fast, friendly services, Logan Services.
Absolutely, and that's what we're doing. The Buckeyes are chasing the championship, and as I said, uncharted waters, not only for college football, but for Ohio State. And Dane, let me ask you right off the bat. In most years, when Ohio State would lose to that team up north, it would be a complete bummer. And it was a complete bummer this year. But guess what? The Buckeyes can still win the national title. As I said, uncharted waters. And I think the fans, it's taken a while for them to get used to that.
Yeah, we're going to see this, I think, all across the college football landscape of how are you adjusting to this. You're absolutely right. Every other year, you lose that game, especially already having one loss. You're moving on to your bowl game. You're having guys discuss, like, are they going pro? We're having completely different discussions right now than, hey, yes, you've lost a game already to Oregon. You lost to Michigan. You still have a foreseeable path to a national championship. Not seen it before. I guess for the Ohio State faithful, they're happy this is the situation, but definitely uncharted waters.
And Timmy, you know, you do the Buckeye show, you hear from the fans, and it's taken a while. There's a learning curve with this, isn't there?
No, I think there is, Dom, and I think it's a mixed bag. Look, I feel the heartbeat of Buckeye Nation, and there's a lot of people upset. I mean, I know, Adam, you and I have talked about, you know, what the 12-team college football playoff was going to do for the rivalry game. And I really do think that the sentiments and the anger and the frustration that we've seen and heard sort of validates that you can expand the college football playoff all you want. And I know we're in the infancy. We're still in the first year, so maybe 10 years passes, we analyze it. But this year right now, even though we knew that the Buckeyes were a lock for this playoff, and pretty soon after, we even knew that they were a lock to get a home game, which was one of the neatest things about going to this 12-team playoff. But the rivalry game still matters. You still need to win it. You still need to go to the Big Ten championship, and the Buckeyes didn't. So in a sense, you're still backing into the playoffs this year.
You know, you look at this situation now, and Ryan Day's had some tough days, Adam, but the bottom line is they're going to host, and this football team has an incredible chance to win the national title.
Absolutely. Not only do they have an incredible chance, they're likely top 3 in the country to win the national title, and we're going to find out their path today. And I think as Buckeye fans, I get it. It's really tough to get off the mat. It's really tough to say, all right, let's move on. It's time to go get a national title when the last time you saw the Buckeyes was one of the most disappointing losses in program history. With that said, this is still one of the best teams in the country. This is still a team that can go out there and win this game. And for Ohio State, it's got to take one game at a time. You have to start. You can't look at it in the grand scheme of, well, we're 4 games from a national title. You got to look at that, whether it's 8-9, whether it's 6-11, wherever it is, go win that first game.
Well, I think the only really thing we have to go on is the history of what happened. We lost to Michigan. Then what'd you do in the Georgia game? You almost messed around and got a shot at the national championship and could have won it. So I think we've seen them perform well after losing this Michigan game. And I think to the rivalry point, this will be a big year in seeing how this plays out in affecting those games. Because if Ohio State does run this year, if they do get a shot at the national title or win it, then you're looking at next year. You can't help but as a fan base saying, like, well, you know, we win it, we lose it. Remember 2024? We won the national championship anyway, so that'll be really interesting.
I think it's really funny because I think you got to go back, 4 years, 3 years. I was debating with Anthony Rothman. I said, would you rather win the national title or would you rather win the rivalry game? And he said, both. Well, you have to win one to win the other.
Right. Not anymore.
Not anymore. Welcome to the new world of college football.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, Dom, but in a perfect world, you want to win the national championship. Yeah. Obviously, winning a national championship is winning a national championship. It's hard to have that conversation around here because the rivalry game is so important. And I think we just continue to prove that the way that it matters and what it means to us, it is the greatest rivalry in sports. And that's what makes this dynamic so interesting, that we're here today talking about what our path is going to be.
And it's like I said, there's going to be a learning curve. We are witnessing the professionalism of college football. And I am a guy born and raised here in Columbus, Ohio. I love the rivalry game. But the sanctity of that game changed when you could play them 3 times in the same year.
Yeah.
And, you know, Dane, you played in it. There's nothing like beating those guys. You're from up on that border and all that. But you know what? I think it's to the point where there's too much pressure on that game, given the bigger scheme. You know, the Super Bowl champion this year will not be undefeated. And at the end of the day, you got all kinds of rivals in college football. And guess what? You lose some of them, you win some of them. But at the end of the year, you want to win the Super Bowl. And that's where college football's heading right now. Why don't we take a look at some of our brackets, what we're predicting?
Yeah.
Do we want to start with Dane, you think? Can we do that, or you want to go mine first?
Why don't we start with yours, since you're over there?
Here's mine. Let's take a look at mine, and we can put it up. And basically, you know, I have Ohio State getting in as the 8th seed and playing Tennessee. There's mine.
So where they're currently ranked in the most recent rankings.
That's what I think it's going to be. And I have Alabama in there. And I don't want Alabama to get in, but the bottom line is Alabama turns on a lot of TVs. Alabama's got a little bit of, you know, that, hey, it's Alabama. And I think they're going to take them over SMU. I think SMU should get in. But if you're asking me, I think this is what it's going to be. I think Ohio State should be ranked higher than Penn State. But Penn State got into the college, you know, the Big Ten title game. And the thing I think that is hurting Ohio State is that was a bad loss to a bad Michigan game.
Okay.
Team. That's what I say.
All right, I'm going to show my bracket. We got a lot to debate here because my bracket is not necessarily what I think the committee will do, because I don't disagree. I think the Buckeyes.
I think that's what they're going to do.
I think it might be 7 or 8. I think this is how it should shape up. I think the Buckeyes should be at 6. And here's why. Texas does not have a quality win on their. They don't have a top 25 win in the college football playoff. I understand their 2 losses are to Georgia. I understand that they had to play in that championship game. They have not beat a top 25 team. That matters. I understand that it's a bad loss.
Their teams have dipped. Going to Ann Arbor, the beginning of the season,
it doesn't look good anymore.
The same.
At all. Ohio State now has wins over 2 top 10 teams. I thought Penn State actually, and we'll get into this, made it a little tougher on the committee because they looked really, really good in that Big Ten championship game, almost helping Ohio State's cause for that quality win. With it, I think the Buckeyes get the 6, and I think old Dabo Swinney could possibly be coming to town. I do think there's a world where this is where the committee puts everything.
All right, well, you know, I did the same philosophy that you did, Adam. This was sort of my hopeful bracket for how I would see these teams. So, I mean, if you take a look through it, we're all pretty much the same with our top 4s, with Oregon, Georgia, Boise State, and Arizona State. Mine looks a little bit different than yours. And we just had the Texas discussion right there. But there's more factors, I think, that you have to get into than just what the actual wins and losses were, too, because there's that third important thing where you're still trying to determine who is the best football team. And that's where I think the debate just can be ongoing and never end when you get in a room full of people that all have different ideas and different philosophies, because Texas, to me, is certainly one of those teams that I think is right up there at the top with as good a chance as anyone to win the national championship. I think a little bit they had a little bit of Ohio State syndrome in that game, where I didn't think that their game plan was enough to where they got the ball to some of their weapons.
Running.
I didn't think they got the ball to some of their weapons. But again, their only 2 losses are to Georgia, who we have as the number 2 team, and it's not just about losses. I think wins are important too. And as you mentioned, they don't have some of the best ones right now, but I still think they're a really, really good football team and one of the best. It's why I kept them at 5, because I didn't think their drop should be as significant. When you look at Penn State, well, we got the Ohio State factor, right? And I think we've discussed that. Yeah. And it seems a little bit strange to me when you also talk about Penn State, just how good of a football team are they, who they're coached by. what they have not done in terms of big wins, and a straight-up home loss to Ohio State, which is why I have the Buckeyes moving up to 7.
And a convincing home loss.
Pretty convincing
When you
home
saw
loss.
Ohio State and Penn State
they gave them a pick six,
yeah.
they gave them a 10-0 lead, and Ohio State still comes back and wins.
Last week, before any of these games, Penn State was still ranked above Ohio State.
Yeah.
So what's the
Yes.
justification for dropping them now? That's the question.
Here we go.
If they were better than them last week,
but-
why would they be worse than them this week?
Let's
That's
see
all.
your bracket, and
Okay,
then
throw it up
we'll
there.
dive into that.
So I took the approach of some sort of order here, okay? So taking the committee at their word and using last week's rankings before the championship games as the model. They said, the championship games shouldn't hurt you. So, okay, they're just an exercise in seeding. So what you're seeing here is pretty much what they were ranked last week. Subbing in, if you won your championship game, obviously Georgia bumps up to the top 4. Boise bumps up to number 3. And Arizona State bumps into number 4 from outside of the top 10.
Obviously, that's supposed to be Ohio State at number 8 and not a double Penn State.
Yeah.
We get what you're saying.
Who made these brackets?
Dom,
Would it have been Adam King?
Well, Dom, the double Penn State.
We're not
really,
gonna
you
point-
can't play 2 games, Dom. They can only play 1 game. Whoever made those brackets. We'll
Whoever
get the
made
intern.
those,
We've got to get the intern in here and then have a
But
conversation.
all that to say, I think that's how you can justify these if you're the committee. And not saying they're going to do that. Obviously, you would love to see Alabama in there, but there was a reason you seeded them that way last week. And I don't think, and that's this part of the biggest debate right now is, should you be punished for having to play that extra game? Should you fall for losing your championship game? I kind of took the approach is the championship game can only help you, as it did with Clemson, on giving you that kind of golden ticket in, but it shouldn't drop you below people who didn't play.
Well, let me just say this real quick, and I am not an apologist for these championship games. I think they need to go away, especially if you're going to go to a 16-team playoff. I think it could be a blessing in disguise that Ohio State didn't have to go to Indy.
Absolutely.
And here's the reason why. You see guys, they've had the worst luck when it comes to injuries. You go to that game, you get a bye week. Well, their bye week came this week. But you go and you get Will Howard hurt, or you go and get someone hurt. And they're trying to keep all these things they've kept. Well, it
should be reseeded.
I
think we can agree to that.
It needs to go away.
If you're gonna have that extra incentive, right, where you're gonna play these championship games, and we're gonna see what they ultimately do with the very first one. If it goes to Dane's point, where it kind of stays along the lines of what the committee was saying last week, as far as a championship game shouldn't hurt you a lot. There I had, and it's not so much about the championship game because I think Penn State played well against Oregon, but they ultimately lost the game, and again, they lost to Ohio State. They had a straight-up loss to them. But they should be reseeding this because that would solve a lot of those issues, and it would further incentivize teams playing hard, winning those conference championships, because then you're not going to get screwed by just something happening with the brackets being wonky. Because, Ohio State and Tennessee, if that winds up being the 8-9, for Oregon then to play
that's a
that
horrible
opponent,
matchup for Oregon.
That's not the best way that you would want that to go. It really isn't.
I'll say this, and I think we have the resumes between Ohio State and Penn State. Here's where that argument doesn't stand up for me. It has nothing to do with the fact that Penn State played in the Big Ten Championship. I get that. My bigger problem is it's not only that Penn State lost to Ohio State, they lose every other category with the Buckeyes. Head-to-head matchup, they consider, common scores. They lost by 8 to Oregon. Ohio State lost by 1. Quality wins. They don't have but 1 quality win, where Ohio State has 2 top 10. So, yes, I get it. They played in
Illinois,
that Big Ten.
it's Illinois.
That can't be your claim to fame if you want to be over an Ohio State team that beat you in your home stadium. With all of this said about championship games, if SMU is not in the bracket, which I think we all agree they should be. You think they won't be.
I don't think they will be.
If they are not, we may never see another championship game
I don't
again.
even necessarily think they should be. But I think if I'm going off of this, they ought to be. They have every reason to be in there. If you already put them, I don't think this is the time to take them out.
Okay.
If you had them in earlier, and if it was a mistake, then that mistake was already made, but you had them ranked, 6th or 7th, kicking them out at this point opens up a whole can of worms.
Once again, though, this committee, it's a subjective thing. Mm-hmm. You've got a group of people that are making these decisions. I will take this another level. I think it's ridiculous that you have a ranking, 1 to 12, and then you could be number 2 in the country or whatever.
Yeah. Yes,
and the way that whole works, the top 4 teams in that ranking should be seated as the top 4 teams.
Do we all agree on that?
I mean,
do we all agree on that?
That is one of the dumbest things I've seen.
Arizona State getting a bye is one of the wildest. They weren't in the playoff 3 weeks ago.
No.
It's insane.
No, it is. And look at what the FCS does, the other level of college football. They don't do it like that. They have been going with this model for quite some time, right? People would point to that if you're a James Madison fan or whatever. I know they bumped up to FBS now, but in the past, Bo Bishop and some of the Montana schools paying attention to the FCS bracket, they don't seed it like that. Whoever their best teams are, that's who the best teams are.
Yeah.
That's what they get. And the college basketball guys in this, right? Here's a novel concept. If you win one of these top 5 conferences, you get in. But if you're not one of the best teams and you are, the 10, 11, and 12 seed filling out the end of the bracket, and then Ohio State, if we have Ohio State as the 5th best team, or if we have them as the 3rd best team,
can
then
I
they're the
this?
3 seed. Whatever.
It took us 500 years to get to this.
I know.
Get to a 12-team playoff,
Yeah.
which makes so much sense. Everybody else does it. Yet some reason we couldn't just come in and say, what if we ranked the 12 best teams and put them in order and
1 to
gave an
12.
automatic bid,
Yeah.
like
What if
every
we
other
seeded 'em?
sport does?
Everything
has to be complicated.
Every other conference, lower college, they figure it out. But here's the problem. They're trying to protect the old with the new. They're trying to protect the bowls. They're trying, and once again, I'm going back to we are witnessing the professionalism of college football, and there's going to be a learning curve. It's going to take some time, and for the fans, it's going to be, look, back when Woody played, they played, 9, 10 games. Now they're playing a 12-game schedule. And in Ohio State's case, they had, 4 road games this year? Everything was home. They want home games. And then you're going to play the conference championship. If you're Ohio State, then you've played 13 games. And then you're going to play, you get a bye week.
Yeah, if you lose the conference championship,
what do we
17
do?
games.
We're at the NFL level now.
The point you keep making is a great one, though, that we're watching it happen, and we're watching it happen in real time without like a pause and a break in the season or a break in a year and a complete reshuffle. Of course, if we were going to say, let's start from scratch, you would build it a lot differently. But I think what you're up against is, yes, protecting the rivalry games, the bowls. You're trying to protect, and now even with the reshuffling of your conferences, you now have a Big Ten that is not even equal from top to bottom. You could make it through without playing half of the teams in your own conference. So even the conference championship game gets complicated. So yes, all those things that they're trying to shift and figure out in real time here, it is so confusing, but if they're trying to have all of those pieces represented, it takes this growing pain.
Well, think about this too, fellas. And this is sacrilege too, but think about this. They're talking about Ohio State hosting December 20th or 21st. I've been told they want it to be a night game.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember when Gene Smith said, well, maybe we should play it in Indianapolis or whatever. And, there was pushback.
If there's anyone due for a night game,
Well, I understand that,
Buckeyes.
but on December 20th or 21st, you don't know what the weather's going to be.
hopefully cold.
And, but my point is this.
Okay.
You're going to charge a lot of money for people to go watch these games, and Ohio Stadium's 100 years old or whatever, and, everyone goes, what are we going to do? What are we going to When they go to a 16-team playoff, how about when this thing goes to almost February before this whole thing's wrapped up with more teams and everything? Do you get
they got the bye week here,
Ohio
so they
doesn't
just
have a
use that
dome
week.
yet.
It
And I
wouldn't
know
be
the
delayed.
Browns want to put one in. Do we see a dome coming to Columbus, Ohio?
The biggest
Sorry,
challenge in
I'm
all
telling
of
you.
this
Has
too-
gone to conspiracy theorist land.
You sound
love
like
it.
Gene with
I
his
love
Hoosier
it.
dome.
Am I wrong,
talk.
Dane?
Listen,
Those are logical steps, Tom. We're here.
Dane.
I don't know what's happening in here.
Dane is the Dom apologist on this
No,
show.
it's-
I won't
it's a
stand for
fact.
it.
Dane's
Well,
a
and
Dane
I'm
was
the
a
old
Too
guy.
nice
I'm
of a man. They're
respecting
not
the
going
40
to
years
build
of
a dome.
experience.
Dane was a slot wide receiver whose game was built on speed and
Yeah.
athleticism. Of course, he wants to play inside on a fast track and a nice play. He'd go crazy at Lucas Oil.
Hey, how did you
Go
do
nuts
against
there.
Michigan, by the way?
We beat them a lot.
Well, a lot. Like 4 pairs?
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
Running that back up. We've moved on. But I think part of this is even like a huge debate, right, in all the seeding is because it is hard to find parity in college football with this many teams and this breadth of you can only play 13. It's hard to a lot of these debates come from, oh well, they played them but they didn't play them, they have this conference is this good, this conference is not that good, and trying to wedge it all into one tournament. There's always going to be a battle until you close the gates and say, okay, the NFL's got it easy. They got 32 teams. You got smaller divisions, you play into that. There's never a debate. So as close as you can get to that is the way to make it fair. Whether they're going to do that, I don't know. But that's the way you got to work. If you're not working in that direction, then you just are probably enjoying the ratings you're getting off of the debate TV shows and whatever else it may be. I mean, there's benefits to both, I guess.
Okay, so moving past that, my question, and it's been really interesting, and I think we talked about it earlier. The 1 seed and the 5 seed do not have the easiest path in the college football playoff, which we thought they might. I mean, you're talking about an 8-9 game with Ohio State and Tennessee facing off with Oregon if that's what shapes up.
Right.
If you're the Buckeyes, and Dane, I'll ask you this, where do you want to be seeded? What's the best path for Ohio State? Because I think it's very likely where they'll end up with facing Indiana and then moving on to play a Georgia team that I don't think is as necessarily strong as they've been.
Yeah, I think there's a couple scenarios, right? I think it seemed like, in my bracket at least, that the 11-6, if that's Penn State, Indiana playing there
Big Ten game.
with the right to go play Boise State, I mean, you could easily see Indiana in the semifinal there. I mean, Indiana, I think they match up well against Penn State. Indiana, Penn State, and then they go and match up against Boise State. Okay. Like, there's worlds where, you could end up with these paths. Now, Ohio State's path, I think where I have them now is the 8-9, Tennessee, and then another rematch with Oregon. It's like, do we want to see it? It doesn't really matter. That's not the easiest path. But, yeah, you're absolutely right. And maybe, I guess another question, and I could be missing something huge on this. What is the big benefit of all of these pre-rankings? In other words, what stops us from saying,
we have rankings.
We have rankings.
No big surprise,
No big one.
but Oregon is the top-ranked team and the number 1 seed. That was just
So
announced.
we begin.
Here we
Georgia
go.
is number 2. No big surprise. They are the number 2 seed. So that both Oregon and Georgia will get byes in their first 2 games.
Timmy's already got his pen going here.
Yeah, we're already jotting them in. Yeah. So
Number 3 we expect to be Boise State. The Broncos get a bye, unless they jump Arizona State over them after that big win.
Well, this is chalk. This is what we thought it would be.
Oh, we get 1. There we go. All right.
And the bottom line is, this is. I'd like to see the rankings first.
You don't want to see the seeding first. You want to.
I want to see the rankings.
Okay, like they've done all year.
I guess I'm saying, like, if you're going to do it this way, what stops you from just saying, sure, keep and this is trying to build it into the model that already exists, because reworking everything is ridiculous. But if you were just to say, okay, let's just play our conference championship games. Let's today look at it, clean slate at everybody. Who do you think your best 12 are? With everything we know, top 4, based on everything we've seen up to today, those are your top 4. I don't see the harm in doing that. They shoot themselves in the foot by all the pre-ranking and then having to justify.
Yeah, it's the same conversation about, like, why do you come out with rankings at the start of the season?
Yeah.
Why don't you take that approach where you wait? It's what we see with the college football playoff rankings. They wait until halfway through the season, but some people look at the AP rankings and justify that. Well, we got Boise State that's
number
on the board
3 now.
And interesting, Dom, they're ranked 9th, so they have the rankings on the left side. They have Boise, so Boise State moves up a spot. They were 10 last week. So you wonder how that shakes
That's
up.
ridiculous, though, that they're 9th because of the whole conference stuff. It's just,
We made the decision today that Dom's going to play the role of, he's going to be curmudgeoned. The old way was the better way. So we're going to play our parts
what's
here.
our ranking?
Dane is
9?
fully onto championship
You're gonna see a
games
lot of-
campaign.
you're gonna see a lot of
the
this
ninth
from Dom
ranked team
today.
And the ranking is now the number 3 seed, right?
It's a great win over
Arizona
UNLV, Dom.
State comes in at 4th. They are your 12th ranked team.
There you go. Does that make any sense?
It's interesting because that tells me that Clemson is now not going to be that 12 seed. So whoever likely gets that 6th game is probably going to play Clemson in 11. Although, where's SMU and Alabama then?
Can I say I love how you delivered that? Why don't we just make you the announcer guy?
yeah.
Let's just keep it. We'll keep the flow here. When they pick it, it's an AK announcement.
By the way, if folks weren't looking at this, some of the odds this morning versus SMU and Alabama, most of the odds makers had SMU as a pretty sizable favorite to be the team in the field over Alabama.
Yeah. Which is different than Tuesday.
That's different. They were coming off at like a minus 350 to minus 390, and Alabama was somewhere in that neighborhood of a plus 250 to plus 280. So that tells you that some people out there really do think that it's SMU and not Alabama.
The Alabama mystique.
It should be SMU.
I totally get it.
On.
I totally understand that. And again, like if you're going to imagine that how they are, again, because I go back to it's 3 factors, and it's kind of you put them in a blender, and then what do you come up with? It's bad losses, it's really good wins, and then it's just who do you think is the best team? You know, throw a couple of those things out. Would you put a 3-loss team over a 2-loss team? I can
we'll
understand.
find out a lot.
I'm not going to argue. My bottom line with all this, and I know some people think that they are ruining college football with this, and as we watch it, I do come back to the fact that it's ridiculous that we won't just rank them 1 through 12 and then seed them that way, because that's how you get the best field and with the heaviest, best matchups near the end of your tournament. But like I am with college basketball, if you don't get in, I'm sorry, I'm not crying. Like if it's SMU that doesn't get in or if it's Alabama that doesn't get in, sorry, we expanded to 12 this year and you didn't get in.
I'll say this.
It's AK's time.
Dom, you can take it if you want.
Well, Clemson's now in at 12.
Which tells me, if I'm SMU, I just took a big gulp. Because I don't think there is a world where SMU is in this bracket but below or above Clemson. Well, they just lost to Clemson.
They are in mine.
It could just be how they're seeding the field then.
They could
get the matchups.
Texas is the 5 seed. They are the number 3 ranked team, so they don't
will
move.
say,
they don't move.
How does that happen?
And that tells me
that's how I had them.
Well, I mean, we'll see how this plays out. I'm feeling very good about how mine matched up so
your
far.
conference championship does not impact anything.
This is how and there's a world where SMU is number 10. They just shifted them down and didn't punish them.
So here we got our first game, guys. We got our first actual game. It's Texas at Darrell K. Royal Stadium hosting Clemson. That's a big time matchup.
That's an 8 o'clock game right there.
That to me is one of the first cool things that we get about going to this crazy 12-team field, that you get a Texas versus Clemson in the first round in Austin. I think that is pretty awesome.
I'll say this. Based off what we've seen so far, I think Ohio State's going to be the 8th seed. Because the fact that they did not move Texas for losing to Georgia at all. I mean, to have Texas ranked that high as a 2-loss team over 1-loss Notre Dame, I don't know. That tells me that the committee is sticking to the Dane Sanzenbacher way of thinking.
There they are.
And there they are.
Penn State.
The number 6-seeded Penn State. They are the number 4 team in the country. So Ohio State will be behind the Nittany Lions, we now know. The team that they beat in Happy Valley.
I told you I didn't like it, but I'm telling you, when it comes out, they're going to say that loss to Michigan hurt Ohio State.
And
of course it did.
This is, and you got to realize, television.
It's phooey, Dom.
It's television.
Yeah, it's true.
Television.
So based off of what the committee said earlier this week, the teams that have not played or that are not playing cannot move. Notre Dame would then be ranked next.
Yeah.
Then
Notre Dame should come.
Then Ohio State and then Tennessee.
Here's the thing that would be right, though. If we're going to talk about horrible losses affecting you, that is at least Michigan. It's at least Michigan in a game that everyone that's covered the game, and here we go.
At 7.
So this is what I'm talking about. Notre Dame has just an unacceptable loss. Like, you should not be that level of team. That's not losing to USC if you're Notre Dame. Yeah. If USC's not chalked up to what they should be, kind of like what they are this year, 500 team. They lost to Northern Illinois on their home field.
But it was earlier.
It was early, but I don't care. The whole season should matter. You're coming off a win over Texas A&M, one of your better program wins, and you lose to Northern Illinois, and so they don't get affected that much.
I think the argument still is, if there were mistakes made, they were made a week ago, 2 weeks ago. I don't think this week is the week that they want to correct them. And if they felt Notre Dame was properly ranked at 4 last week, then they've only bumped them down to make room for your conference champion, and they end up at 7.
So we expect to see likely Ohio State right here at 8 hosting Tennessee.
Ranked 6.
There you go. Ranked 6. The 8-seeded Ohio State Buckeyes. They will host a game. I for one, am a little bit frustrated because let's get rid of conference championships. We just watched all this football. It didn't matter. Say? It did not matter one bit. It mattered.
It did not matter.
I guess it mattered for Oregon,
mattered
Penn
for
State,
Clemson.
and it mattered for Clemson. But
Arizona State and Clemson, they get in, obviously.
But apparently,
so
the committee is their job is to sit down at the end of the day and push teams together and say, how do they stack up? The idea that you're going to say, well, I'm not going to compare Ohio State and Penn State because Ohio State didn't play this week. I don't know. I have a problem.
Seeing the way this is going right now, Alabama or SMU?
Alabama. I don't think there's a chance where SMU gets into this playoff.
Yeah, I think SMU is coming. Well, I think we're getting Tennessee, SMU
at 10.
Well, yeah, wait, no, I'm sorry. Because, yes, they're not going to penalize SMU for the playoff championship. I'm sorry.
I
just went against everything I said.
Yes, I don't see a world where they let Alabama in.
I said that backwards.
Notre Dame should be sending thank you notes to the service academies this year for those teams being a little bit better.
Yeah, being ranked.
Just to pump up their overall schedule. Because, I mean, USC certainly wasn't good. And there you go. There's the Tennessee Volunteers ranked 7th, and they'll be in that 8-9 game.
With a high
coming to the Horseshoe.
At the Horseshoe. That's a big-time game.
I'll tell you
what.
My
Goodness.
I think everybody's going to get their dream of a night game in the shoe. And what does that set up for the Buckeyes if they can get through that? Welcome to your rematch
with Oregon.
Dom and Adam.
Probably in the Rose Bowl.
Yeah.
Right.
Probably in the Rose Bowl.
Learn how to say Ia Maliava, right?
Oh.
So then we
Dom,
should.
good luck with that one.
Yeah, Nico Ia Maliava.
So then we should see SMU, I would guess, going to Notre Dame.
Yeah, so here you go. You're going to find out SMU or Alabama right here, aren't you?
Yep. I think it's Alabama.
No.
No,
we have to wait one more. Yeah,
no, you're not going to get it here.
I think it will be SMU because they've said so far that the conference championship games do not matter. They cannot penalize you other than earning you that bye, earning you a top 4 seed.
And I'll tell you, I don't mind that.
Dane, I can't stand it.
Then what? Then
Indiana's going to be coming next, right?
If it doesn't matter,
Indiana.
why play it? Why
Well,
risk getting someone hurt?
Yep. I mean, SMU could have sat out yesterday. Penn State could have sat out, taken a bye week.
You're going to get the battle for Indiana, aren't you? You're going to get the Hoosiers going on the road. Is that what we're about to see here?
Driving up.
Wouldn't you see it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to get the battle for Indiana, Bloomington, and South Bend.
I like that. All right,
we're still waiting on these last 2 teams to fill out.
But Ohio State
field.
and Tennessee, we now know that's a Tennessee team that is scary.
7's taken on 10.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't.
7-10.
There it is.
Oh, there you go.
Indiana.
So there it is.
Indiana, Notre Dame. So that's an in-state game.
But I guess. But here's what is interesting though. They just had Indiana jump SMU.
They did. They have Indiana at 8.
Because Indiana did not play.
Indiana did not play.
And
So they did penalize SMU.
They did penalize SMU for losing. That throws everything out the window. Because if you were not going to penalize them,
I'll be shocked if it's not Alabama.
That makes me think it very well could be Alabama.
No, now you're flipping.
You can't stick to the mindset that it doesn't matter and then change on one team.
They do what they want.
Exactly.
Because
that says one thing.
If Alabama's in this bracket, I'm walking off set.
Let me ask you a question. Which program has more panache?
It's not about panache, Dom. I don't even know what panache means.
I'm saying,
you can't
Dom,
put them
up
in.
until this point, they stayed exactly, and we're not going to penalize you, but you can bump down. But that little wiggle room they just gave by saying Indiana did not play, but SMU fell below them when they were ranked above them the week before, says you did penalize them.
If they do the right thing, they take
really
SMU.
interesting.
If they do the right thing.
Do the right thing, committee.
Come on, committee. Do the right thing. We are awaiting the final team in the 12-team college football
Eric
playoff.
Dickerson. Let's see Pony Express.
Whoever it is will go on the road to Happy Valley to play 6-seeded Penn State, which either Alabama or SMU. It's going to be.
I like these southern schools having to come up.
I know.
North now.
For
every bowl game you would go down and play them in their home stadium. Now they get to come up here and see what winter in Ohio and Pennsylvania is like.
We only have one example of that, right? Tennessee coming up here. Yeah.
Well, SMU.
Unless you see Bama going to Penn State.
Oh yeah.
SMU's not exactly the North either. You know.
We are awaiting the final.
That's
final
true.
one. Final thought. You think it's Alabama?
I think it's Bama.
I think it's SMU.
SMU.
Who do you think it is?
Now I think it's Bama.
All right.
I don't see any other reason you would put Indiana.
It is SMU. All right. Alabama.
They did the right thing. Ooh.
Alabama misses the first 12-team college football playoff.
I think Nick Saban's not going to be happy.
Wow.
Wow. So
we have it. We did it, gentlemen.
There we go.
We built a playoff.
We have it. And, if you're just tuning in, you are watching Chasing the Championship. Dom Tiberi, Adam King, Tim Hall, and Dane Sanzenbacher. And Timmy, we really appreciate the sponsors making this happen.
Yes, we do. Chasing the Championship is sponsored by Logan Services, fast, friendly services, Logan Services.
All right, there you have it. There is the bracket. All right, let's break down Ohio State and Tennessee. Tennessee, like Ohio State, has 2 losses. Tennessee had a loss to Arkansas, and they lost to Georgia. I have seen Tennessee play a number of times this year. Very skilled players. They have speed. They're an SEC team. How will that affect them coming up here, Dane? The speed. You played receiver. They have some fast guys like Ohio State, and they both have to play in this weather. But how will that affect a Southern team coming up here? And it could be 20 degrees, 19 degrees. Heck, it could be snowing. We don't know what it'll be.
Yeah, weather always has its factor. I think the days of the SEC speed has kind of gone by the wayside since recruiting has gotten so national. I mean, we have kids from all over the country, and we have players that are as fast as anybody in the country. So I don't think the days of the old Big Ten ground and pound versus the fast SEC, I think that's like 10 years gone. But I think, yeah, anytime you're coming up and you're not accustomed to that weather, yeah, it can play a factor. Cold's not fun for anybody, so I won't say that Ohio State's going to love to go out there if it's 20 degrees, but it definitely could slow down a high-powered offense. It could make things, tight a little bit. Whether or not that works well for Ohio State, I don't know. That's a good discussion to have, actually.
And Knoxville, I've been to Knoxville, and they have seasons down there, but they're not as dramatic as we are up here, obviously. Timmy, you look at this matchup, and you look at Ohio State. How many questions do you think the Buckeyes have coming out of that Michigan game going into this contest? Yeah. Or do you think Ryan Day and the coaches are saying that was an aberration, we did it wrong, and this was on coaching, we should have quit trying to run into the middle of the line, we should have turned our Ferraris loose? I mean, is that what their mindset is? And how hard is it going to be to convince the players that they're fine?
I think what it comes down to now is all that stuff that you talk about, losing to Michigan. Well, everybody that is in this field now is feeling like they've got a shot. So, yeah, you're hearing the Ohio State players and the coaches in the recent press conferences, even though that last one that we had was kind of a strange one because we were kind of celebrating National Signing Day, but also breaking down the Michigan game and trying to find the excitement for still having a shot at this thing and rallying. I think Tennessee feels the exact same way, though. So I think maybe, you alluded to weather. I don't know how much of a factor. We don't. Whenever we see the forecast, but if this game is in
they both got to play.
If this game is in the 40s, throw that out. Like if it's snowy in 20s, then we'll talk about it. But I look at the matchups. I look at the teams. I look at you've got Nico Iamaleava, who I thought was going to be a little bit better this year as far as numbers.
He has struggled.
2,500 yards though, 65%. He's got 19 touchdown passes to 5 interceptions. He's definitely flashed some of that brilliance that people saw from him on the recruiting trail. He does have that mobility. He didn't have a ton of rushing touchdowns, but he's run it for 311 on the ground. The guy they have is all SEC running back Dylan Sampson. This guy's lethal. This will be probably one of the better players. You think about some of the running backs for Oregon that they saw. This is a 1,400-yard, 22 rushing touchdown guy, and he can do it out of the backfield as well. And they don't have maybe some of the weapon names like Ohio State does for wide receivers, but Nico's got a big 6'5" target, an Oregon transfer, and wide receiver Dante Thornton Jr. as well. So this is a really good team, and I'm not going to sit here and say, Buckeye victory. They got Tennessee. This is going to be one after the game plan that we saw and how they tightened up in a big game against Michigan, that they're going to have a brilliant performance to win this football game.
Adam, I go back to a couple years ago, the last time they were in the playoff, and obviously coming off at the tough loss to Michigan, and they go in against a Georgia football team. And I know Ryan Day addressed the team and said they were going to turn them loose. And they really did. They did everything but win the game. And I don't want to rehash that I think they got ripped off, but they did. Ohio State did. But with that said, do you think we see Ryan Day go back to that and realize, hey, we're just going to turn them loose? This is the time to do it.
I think it's interesting you say that, because I think if they had gotten Indiana 100%, they would have said, let's let it fly, let's have a good time. This Tennessee team, they struggle a little bit up front. And so I think Ohio State might revert back to the idea of let's run the football against this team and prove that we can do that. With that said, I think you have to throw everything out the window. If you are Ohio State, this game, yes, the play calling. I've said before, I remember Ryan Day on the sideline of that Georgia game. His face was so red it matched your tie. He was firing up. He was screaming at guys, excited, not angry. And I remember thinking, that's why they're winning this game. You need that Ryan Day. You need a team that knows that they had everything taken from them last Saturday, but here they sit on Sunday with everything back in front of them. And it's not going to take much to get them up for this Tennessee game. A game like Indiana, you're like, well, we beat these guys, we're going to go out and beat them, and now we look at the rest of the path. This Tennessee team is very good. The one thing that their weakness is the deep ball. He cannot throw that deep ball very well, their quarterback, which benefits the Buckeyes because sometimes that is the Buckeyes' weakness on defense.
Dane, you played as a player. You played in the NFL. What is Ryan Day saying to his guys? And the fact that Ohio State is going to play a marquee game against Tennessee, the fact that it's going to be a night game in the Horseshoe, the fact that their goal of still winning the national title is there, and I understand a Michigan loss was a bad loss, and I hope they just say, hey, we'll just chalk that up, and it was an aberration.
That's all you can say, right?
They lost to an Oregon team in Oregon's place by 1 point, and they, in my opinion, should have won that game. Do they revert back to that? This is not going to be a hard sell to get these guys up for this, is it?
No, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head with the 2022 situation with Georgia. I think you came off a tough loss to Michigan, and it wasn't any. I mean, this was a tough one. That was a tough one. You still had to talk to your team, refocus them, and we saw a team that we didn't really know existed. For us that watched them all year, you saw a team that was firing. A C.J. Stroud that was like, he can run.
That's
like,
I was going to say that. Yeah.
I mean, and this is like, and you saw a completely different team where the feeling around here was, okay, now we got to go play Georgia, to watching that game, and they looked like the better team. So I think whatever you did there, I think you just run that back. There will be a tough part of it is that you're going back into our stadium. Usually is a good thing, but you got to kind of get that taste out of your mouth from the last time you were in there.
Can I bring something up to you guys that I feel like never gets talked about?
Does it have to do with the playoff in Ohio State?
Of course it does.
I didn't know if it was like a personal thing. We could do it off camera.
Can this wait 18 minutes?
I mean, you know me, but I'm not going to completely derail the show right here. I'm watching these games last night, and I mean the finish of that Clemson SMU game. I don't know if you guys stayed up for that or watched the highlights, but that was
he's going to insult the
pretty
kicker.
Good stuff. It's the kicker. It's the kicking game. Yeah, it is. I feel like I think there's a stat that we haven't made a 50-plus yard field goal in 5 years, and we know that there was a pretty important one. We could be, in an indoor venue where you got to sail in a 50, 51, 52-yard kick every now and then if you're going to be a championship-level football team. And I'm watching a true freshman who, gives this smile to the sideline, right before he goes out there, and he just nails a 56-yarder to win a conference championship. We don't have that, and people are asking me on Twitter, who's the last, stud kicker we've had? And I'm like, you know his name. Say his name. It's Nuge. That's how long it's been since we've had a stud kicker that you can count on.
Good.
Stud kicker.
All right.
Stud kicker that you can
An
throw
NFL
out there.
kicker?
If you had to kick 4 or 5 kicks in a game, if that's the way it's going to be when you rely on your defense and you win a lower scoring affair. I don't know if I don't have that faith right now.
Well, following that up, and Adam, I'll ask you, because I broke it down to 4 plays, cost Ohio State the Michigan game. As bad as they played offensively, 4 plays. The 2 interceptions. The 1 interception was just a gift. You give them their first touchdown right there, bring it back to the 2. It was a gift. But those were chip shot field goals. And, Ryan talked about the wind swirling. Well, Michigan made a 54-yarder.
Yes, they did.
And that, going into this game, Will Howard cannot make the kind of mistakes he made against Michigan. And I'm going to take the heat off the kicker. Score touchdowns. You got to score touchdowns in these games.
You won't always do that.
Yeah, but you have to.
But here, I'll say this. Everything that happened offensively in that Michigan game, I think we can all agree, is because Ohio State was way too tight. I think Ohio State would admit that they were way too tight in their play calling, wanting to run, wanting to prove toughness. That is not what we're going to see from here on out.
You hope.
Well, but I think they've at least learned a lesson in that regard, that what wins them football games, what got them 1 point short of Oregon, is that they're willing to just let it fly.
They have Jeremiah Smith. Turn him loose.
Turn him loose. You have a Mecca Abuka. You have Carnell
Turn him loose.
And so when you say all that, they do need to score touchdowns. Timmy, you're also right. Because I think if you went back and looked at the last, 10 national champions, I bet there's a moment in that season where they had to kick a field goal to win, to tie a game, to keep their season alive, and they probably made it. I will say, you're upset with Jaden Fielding. That's okay. I understand. He kicked really well against Oregon. He made 2 clutch kicks against Oregon that kept Ohio State in that game. He struggled down the stretch here. So you got to get your mind right. But I don't think that Jaden Fielding isn't the right guy for the job. There, for a long part of this season, I thought, wow, when was the last time we had a kicker that you could just trust walking on the field? I felt like that until the Michigan
You played the game. You don't want to put this stuff on the kicker, do you? You want to score touchdowns.
No, I've been waiting all this time to say just that. See, that's why Dom and I are we're
you're the
kindred,
apologist for the committee.
We're kindred spirits here. No, I think, okay, so one, going back to the SMU game, yes, incredible field goal by the Clemson kicker. It's a tie game. I'm winking when I go out there too in a tie game, because even if you miss it, you're not supposed to. There is zero pressure on a tie game field goal. 2, even if Ohio State makes both those field goals, we still lose, because then we're only up 6, and Michigan kicked a field goal at the end just because they didn't need a touchdown.
Right.
But they were on the 2-yard line. I think odds are they're going in there to score, and they win by 1 anyway. I think, yes, there are teams that have been championship teams and have to win those close games, and a lot of times it's the kicker. But that speaks a lot to there's a certain amount of luck that you have to catch too. And I'm not saying there's not skill in these kickers, but across the board, games that came down to that, this Ohio State-Michigan game, if it did come down to a field goal, you did something wrong elsewhere. And I don't think the kicker was the issue in this Ohio State-Michigan game.
I completely agree. You can't put a loss on a kicker. Because
at this level, I mean, at the NFL level, that's about the only time I have really high expectation for kickers. You know, at the college level, how much faith do you really have? You can get some really good ones and they can make some good kicks, but you as a coach, and I'm sure that coaching staff feels like, we hope we don't have to get in a situation where it's all riding on
You never
this.
hear a coach say, hey, I hope
didn't
we have to kick a field. Every coach I've ever heard.
You want to control it. You
You
want
want
to
to
take it out
score
of their hands.
touchdowns.
What, 3 times they threw an interception, missed 2 field goals? Is that right? I can't remember the stats off the top of my head.
Yeah.
but-
Didn't Tressel always say ending any drive with a kick is a decent way to do it?
Well, yeah, that's Jim Tressel. He had a
He
special
also
way to
said the
end
punt
games.
was the most important play.
I'm not saying they're not important. You want to
Yeah.
make the kicks. I'm just saying in the grand scheme of things,
Well,
the kicker is about like
Of course, in the grand
4th
scheme.
or 5th on the list of things that are reasons you might have lost that game or in the importance of this Ohio State team.
Tressel ball perfected making kicks more important. You cannot make kicks more important in modern college football. Touchdowns win every game.
Okay. Well,
Penn State yesterday maybe wins that game if they don't go for the field goal in the first half.
I disagree to a certain extent, because I think when you get into these championship level games that are more like NFL games, because Dom, you made that point that it's going more professional. When I watched the Cincinnati Bengals make their run to the Super Bowl, every single game came down to a dude that they nicknamed back then Money Max, Salem one through the uprights. And that was the reason that they moved on. And no, I would not have blamed him for the loss. Then you're going to come down to, but it's like they say players win games, coaches lose games. I'm not going to like put the onus on a kicker for not making it. I'm just saying that if you have a better kicking game, you're going to win more championships. Because Texas and Georgia, they couldn't score touchdowns.
I go back to what I said, Tim. I am not excusing that. I said they lost the Michigan game because of 4 things: 2 interceptions and 2 missed field goals. What I'm saying is he shouldn't have been put in that position. They should have been scoring touchdowns. And I think every coach and anyone that ever played the game understands that. You want to score touchdowns.
Totally.
But the field goals, yeah, you got to make them. But, you know, the field goal guy, I mean, sometimes you wonder if the guys are even on the team, right?
Look,
how often do you see them?
It's not Noah Ruggles' fault. I'm not
blaming. I'm just saying.
But if he makes that, they will likely win the national championship.
Yes, now
and
the
destroy
Noah Ruggles
TCU.
ones, I argue,
So
if they had
there's
gotten
that.
5 more yards, maybe you make it easier on Noah Ruggles. So again,
Right.
you shouldn't have been in that scenario. But yes,
That
it
Ryan
helps.
Day got pretty conservative, though, and settled, which didn't make much sense.
Yes, but then you
know?
didn't get conservative against Oregon, and they got the OPI and didn't get a field goal. So,
Right.
Timmy, Timmy?
Right,
What do you do?
I don't know.
You sit at home and read a book. Stop playing football games.
All right, so let's go to this matchup with Tennessee, a night game in the Horseshoe. How will the fans react, do you think? This is going to be new. I said it's a learning curve. You know, the last time they were there, they didn't seem too happy, Dane. We heard a lot of visceral whatever. You know, if you're a fan out there watching, first of all, let me just say this. Sports is supposed to be a distraction. Sports is, you know, it's really no different than a movie theater, going out to dinner. It is that entertainment dollar. And your sports team is supposed to make you happy, not cause misery. Occasionally they lose.
We're in the wrong game.
Yeah, we are.
And we know the Ohio State fans are pretty passionate, and I understand them. We saw a lot of passion. We've seen a lot of passion on social media. What I would say now, though, this is the time to rally the troops because, again, I go back, yeah, it was a bad loss to Michigan, but this team went in to Oregon, and you were there.
I was there.
1 point.
Real quick, Dom, I don't want to interrupt you. We now know December 21st, 8 o'clock Eastern time is when Ohio State will play Tennessee. You get
What a
your
surprise.
night game.
Saturday night.
There
What a
you go.
surprise.
You get your
Saturday
night game in the shoe.
At 8 p.m.
At 8 p.m., if they win that, they would play the Rose Bowl against Oregon.
You know what? That's wonderful news for me because I already had it like marked down on our fan programming schedule as the Saturday night game. So
Wow.
a great guess.
Confidence.
Now no more work to do.
But getting back to what you were
8
saying, I'm sorry.
p.m. on Saturday, December 21st. For you fans, I want to go back. Now you know. And the tickets will be available. The fans are important to the players, aren't they? They're going to be important in this game. You guys feed off of them, don't you?
Yeah, well, for the better and the worse, yes. I think, and that's what I said going into this Michigan game when we did our roundtable here. You know, it's going to be tough for Ohio State to play at home because if things aren't going well, things get real chirpy in there, or it gets real quiet. You start to feel the pressure of that place.
As you're a player, do you feel that when the fans are booing?
Now, I was impervious to pressure, Dom, but
Okay,
a lot of players do feel that.
He's
Yeah.
from Toledo. He doesn't
Yeah.
know what
But
that
you
is.
do. You guys hear the boos and all that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you're college kids and you're in this environment. Now you do your best you can to close it out. But I think that, you know, as I'm looking at this thing, this is another, you mentioned the cool things about that we're going to get out of this playoff system is a Tennessee team, an SEC team coming into Ohio State.
Absolutely.
At 8 o'clock
And
at
I
night.
think that can
Absolutely.
go a long way, to your point earlier, Adam, in saying, okay, or in your point, Tom, of how we're looking at these in-conference rivalries moving forward, that now we get to see live in the flesh a Big Ten versus an SEC matchup and what that feels like and what this new world of college football in this playoff looks like when it's not everything riding on one Ohio State-Michigan game. I mean, I think this could be as good of a cleansing for the fan base as it can be for the players because you're getting to see, okay, wait, there's a bigger picture here.
Yes.
We can still do this. If you
Right.
go in there and you beat an SEC team at night, you move on to the next round. I think that's
And the
all
next
this.
round is the Rose Bowl.
I'll say this. We have never seen this in Ohio State history. In 120 years, we have never seen them walk off the field at the shoe with a loss or a win in the last game against Michigan and know they are coming back.
And
to
then
play
coming back.
And you're right. And I'll say this.
It's a great point.
I go back to the idea of not playing Indiana. I know you're probably frustrated if you're a Buckeye fan saying, why are we not higher over Penn State? I don't know that Indiana gets the draw that Ohio State needs right now because Buckeyes already beat them. Fans are like, okay, we got to get on to the next round. Tennessee, an SEC team. Any fan out there that has been frustrated with where this team is, I think they're going to put that aside to go root for Ohio State.
I would hope.
To be, you would hope. And you've got to understand something, and I've gone on this soapbox a couple times, and I apologize. But if you genuinely believe that you'd rather win the rivalry game than win a national title, I just don't get it. I understand it's frustrating. I understand you want both. It just, they only hand out one national title. There is only one team in this 12-team playoff that gets to walk off the field in Atlanta as champions. Why not get on board and say, let's ride?
And think about this, guys. Michigan is 7-5. Yes, they beat Ohio State, but they're going to get a bad bowl game. They're not. They don't.
The
They can't
Pop-Tart
win the
Bowl.
national title. 7-5. You got the bragging rights. Great. Congratulations. And that is what the fans need to understand, the Ohio State fans, that although it stinks, it's like when the Cleveland Browns would lose to the Steelers or the Ravens beat whatever.
It ain't quite like that, but I get
But
what you mean.
Timmy, it's heading that way.
Yeah.
It's heading that way. I go back to what I said.
Look.
The Super Bowl champion will. I mean, how many have ever been undefeated?
Well, I think this
been a couple.
could be one of the so fans are going to feel how they feel. They're not going to be watching this broadcast and be like, you know what, these guys are right. I should stop taking this.
Or is that what are we doing up here?
But
then?
I'm saying, I think the makeup of this playoff system could force them into that because you're going to naturally be playing a really good Tennessee team. You're going to see a uniform you're not used to seeing in the stadium. You're going to get this matchup, and you'll see it in a different light. And as I'm looking at, the only question mark I have for the committee on this was the SMU Indiana flopping there. Everything else looked like they hadn't taken the championship games into consideration, except maybe they looked at this and said, this is what we're trying to create. Maybe it's matchup, because if they didn't do that, it would have been Indiana-Penn State. Maybe they say, hey, this is one instance. We want to go out of conference with this. Let's send Indiana to Notre Dame, send SMU to Penn State. That's really I haven't listened to what their explanation is, but that could make all the sense in the world. And I don't mind that as a thought to get these cross-conference matchups.
Look, I mean, we're talking, we're spending all this time. We've got brackets out, guys.
Timmy,
have any of you guys filled one out yet?
It's been 20 minutes. We've been working.
Yeah.
When did you do this?
Well, I mean, you guys are yapping so much. I'm filling out my bracket.
Timmy,
so
do you want
that's
to
what we're
take
doing.
us through your national champion?
So, yeah, just my knee-jerk bracket here. I have a Texas-Georgia rematch in the national championship right there. So I do apologize.
I just want to walk off right now.
Of course you do. I know I'm
Texas,
you
Georgia.
have to pick the Buckeyes to win it all. I know, but this is just what my gut instinct tells me, that the Buckeyes
Dane
beat
is looking at
Tennessee,
you with the look of like, what in the...
Dane's not even on set
and then they
anymore.
go out in the second round. So Texas, Oregon, Penn State, Georgia
What do you got in that cup,
in the
Coach?
semis. And Texas beating Georgia in the rematch in a
It's not water, I'll tell you that much.
a third game for those two teams.
Timmy, this is garbage.
right.
This is what this is garbage.
All right, we got Timmy. Who's
you
your
go.
national championship?
Yeah, that's
This is good television.
This good television.
Well, good thing it's not on here.
AK's got to come back to me.
All right, go ahead. Who's your national title?
I'll say this. I think whoever wins the Rose Bowl wins the national championship. I think it's Ohio State or Oregon. I think they are the two best teams in the country. I saw Georgia's defense struggle. I have a lot of questions about Georgia's defense. Texas offense, they can be good. Quinn Ewers has not panned out the way he should have. So I think that Rose Bowl game, and it's good for the Buckeyes because I'm looking here. I know this bracket has Alabama. Let me look at the actual bracket. The thing that stinks for Ohio State, it may very well wind up that the toughest game, much like in 2014, is not the championship game at the end of the day.
Right.
You've got to go through, arguably Texas.
That's the national title game, right?
You think
there.
that, same with me, the Rose Bowl.
If they beat Oregon and they're facing Texas, that's not a walk in the park, and certainly
that's what
them
I'm
meeting Georgia in the title is not a walk in the park for the Buckeyes
I would say
either.
that Georgia would be the easiest of those games. Of Oregon and Texas?
I got
I
Ohio
think-
State playing Georgia in the national title. I've got Ohio State getting Oregon in the Rose Bowl. I love it. And I think we're going to get that rematch with Georgia. And I want to see that. And it's back in Atlanta, isn't it?
It's back in Atlanta.
Oh, we'll go back to the scene of the crime where if there is targeting, we sure didn't see it that night, Marvin Harrison Jr. And yes, I'm still mad about it. Ohio State should have won that game.
It's great that we got this on because we've never done a stream like this where Dom didn't somehow end up back on the Marvin Harrison Jr. targeting. So I'm glad. right under the wire, Dane. Give us your pick.
I'm just taking what Dom took.
Oh, gosh, you guys
just to
can't
keep
be
it
on
on
the
brand.
same
You agree,
wavelength
don't
What
the
he said.
whole time.
Isn't that what you want?
Yeah.
I do think the
I think
Buckeyes
he made
get the
the
best
best
of
argument.
Oregon. I do think the Buckeyes get the best of Oregon.
I
So
think-
all three of you picking them to win the national championship.
I do. I am.
Don't you host something called the Buckeye Show?
Of course I do. Yes, you know that.
Yeah. Well, this has been fun, Tim.
Am I supposed to just pick them every
No,
time?
you're supposed to be honest.
Oh,
We're
okay.
wrapping up, and obviously, if you're just joining us, this is Timmy Hall. He does the Buckeye Show on 97.1 The Fan.
Thanks, guys.
And we
This
want
was
to
fun.
thank our sponsors. This has been fun. hasn't
Yes,
it been?
yes. Chasing the Championship has been presented by Logan Services. Fast, friendly services Logan services.
And
They make
are,
you do the reads because you got the
and the
perfect
Buckeye
face and
show
voice.
Monday through Friday, right?
That's right. Yeah, 6 o'clock. Sometimes Dane is on the show with me.
Occasionally.
I love this guy.
Dane, how are you so stoic all the time?
Am I?
Jeez.
No,
terrifying.
I'm usually it's hard to follow these acts, so I just try to stay quiet
There's
to
a lot of
hide
acts
saying
here,
something
trust
dumb.
me.
Yeah.
Dom Jr.
There's a
over
lot
here.
of acts. Anyways, we want to thank you for tuning in. Chasing the Championship, Dom Tiberi, Adam King, Timmy Hall, the one and only Dane Sanzenbacher, and he and I, we kind of were on the same page today.
Jeez, wall to wall.
And then don't forget, coming up tonight, wall-to-wall sports. Thanks for watching Chasing the Championship. We'll see you tonight, wall-to-wall sports.
All right.
All right, leave it on. We're going to tape something for Wall. 9 minutes.
Oh,